The world believed Princess Diana's fortune would vanish into the royal vault after her death. They were wrong. When executors unsealed her will in 1997, they discovered something the palace never anticipated.
You think you know Princess Diana, right? The people's princess, the fairy tale bride, the royal icon everyone loved. But what if I told you that everything you thought about her final wishes is about to be turned upside down? Who did she really leave her estate to? And why did she hide a mysterious shadow trust that even the palace didn't know about? Today, we uncover the explosive truth the royal family never wanted revealed, a secret so powerful, so shocking, that it could change everything you thought you knew about Princess Diana. The fairy tale princess who became a rebel Princess Diana was not born into invisibility, but she was not raised to be an international celebrity either. Diana Frances Spencer grew up at Althorpe, where she was surrounded by aristocratic traditions but was also affected by her parents' messy divorce. She was just 20 years old when she met Charles III, and she was working as a kindergarten aide. She was quiet, soft-spoken, and almost shockingly typical. Then came the 29th of July, 1981. The wedding at St. Paul's Cathedral was a huge event, like something out of an empire. About 750 million people saw Diana walk down the aisle in ivory silk and antique lace. Her 25-foot train followed her like a comet's tail. The world didn't simply see a ceremony, it saw a crowning of optimism. She was young, beautiful, and up-to-date. People who thought the monarchy was cold and distant now felt warm. But when fairy tales come true, they can be dangerous. Behind the royal doors, loneliness set in quickly. Charles still had feelings for Camilla Parker Bowles, even though they had been together before Diana and never truly went away. Diana later said that she could feel Camilla's presence even before the wedding. The insecurity grew into something worse. She got bulimia, which was a private fight she would later talk about in public as a way to get control in a world where she felt powerless. The palace prized calmness. Diana was full of feelings. The flaws got bigger in the 1980s, but the illusion stayed strong until it didn't. The Camillagate tapes came out in 1992 and showed private phone calls between Charles and Camilla. The shame was felt all around the world. The formal separation was declared the same year. Then Diana did something that had never been done before. She broke the silence in 1995 when she talked to Martin Bashir on Panorama. She continued, calm, hurt, and clearly indignant. It was more than just a confession. It was a statement of freedom. The bashful bride changed into a completely different person. A lady who knew more about the power of the media than the people who raised her. At the White House, she danced with John Travolta. She became friends with Elton John. She shook hands with people with AIDS sans gloves at a time when many were scared. She walked through minefields in Angola, changing what royal service could be like. The palace valued stoicism. Diana used her vulnerability as a weapon. By the early 1990s, the fairy tale had not only broken, but it had also turned upside down. She was no longer the royal family's jewel. She was the strongest moral advocate for it. The establishment thought her volatility was bad for stability. The public saw that it was real. And that change, from a dutiful princess to a worldwide humanitarian rebel, did something that can't be undone. When a woman who has found her voice decides how her legacy will go on, it is never by chance. The ache that used to make her quiet became something much worse. The pain made her want to help others even more. Diana's brave work that changed the world. Diana didn't allow her despair stop her as her marriage started to break apart. Instead, she used her pain to do something. While the royal family sat silent and solemn, Diana spoke, behaved, and demonstrated that she cared. She was more than simply a princess. She was someone who could really change things. Every handshake, visit, and public appearance was a statement. She was saying to everyone, "I won't be quiet. I will aid the folks that need me the most." Her trip to the AIDS unit at Middlesex Hospital in 1987 changed everything. People were frightened of AIDS back then. A lot of people felt it could be transmitted by touch, and patients were typically ignored or treated harshly. Diana didn't care about regulations, being scared, or what other people would think. She shook hands with patients without gloves and smiled, listened, and showed respect. She even said, "HIV doesn't make me stop for a second." That simple act was more than a handshake. It was a statement to the world that being sick is not something to be ashamed of and that everyone deserves care. People all over the world noticed how brave she was and started to treat patients differently. At the time, most people couldn't see how her modest act of bravery saved lives. But that wasn't the end of it. Diana's next job was much more dangerous. Landmines. In January 1997, she went to the nation, where thousands of innocent people had been hurt or murdered by concealed landmines. She strolled carefully through the fields in a sweater and jeans, with no helmet or guards, just her bravery. People all across the world saw the photographs of her walking over the lethal mines. People were shocked, governments were embarrassed, and action finally happened. The Ottawa Treaty, which banned anti-personnel mines, was signed months later. Millions of mines had been demolished by 2023, and Diana's bravery had brought the subject to the world's attention. She had taught the world that one person could make the powerful do something. Diana also worked hard for other causes. She visited leprosy patients, made friends with orphans, and assisted the destitute. She made people feel better who were being overlooked by others. A lot of the time, the royal family didn't like it. Charles is said to have labeled her work attention-seeking. Diana didn't care, though. She realized that what she was doing was saving lives. Her labor for charity brought in millions of dollars, changed laws and rules, and gave hope to many people. Every time she visited or did something nice for someone, she showed that the monarchy couldn't control her heart or her effect. Her job was more than just helping others. It was a kind of protest. The palace had injured, trapped, and humiliated her, but she showed that she could stand strong and fight back by what she did. Every time she went to the hospital, every time she walked over a minefield, and every time she shook hands with someone, she broke the restrictions that tried to keep her quiet. She wanted understanding instead of obedience, which was what tradition wanted. The institution prized stillness, but she wanted action. Diana had learnt that showing kindness might be just as strong as any royal order. Her divorce was official in 1996, and she was no longer stuck in an unpleasant marriage. But her fights were far from over. It was really hard for her because of custody fights over her kids and constant media attention. But Diana kept strong and on task. She started making plans for something that would still be there when she was gone. She wrote her will carefully so that her voice, her compassion for others, and her beliefs would continue to have an effect on the world. And here's the stunning part. She didn't just plan it in secret. This moment came after every brave thing she had done before. Helping AIDS patients, clearing landmines, caring for orphans, and helping the neglected. Her last deed would make sure that Diana's strength, defiance, and kindness would never be forgotten, even after she passed. She has already changed people's lives around the world. But she was ready to change the rules for good with her will. Everyone was shocked by what she did next. Who would she give all to? And why? The answer would stun both the royal family and the public. But that story is next. Diana saw courage as going against the rules. Being kind was powerful. And when death drew near, her will became her most powerful weapon. The night Diana took control, it was July 1996 at the palace in Kensington. The room was full of sadness, but the summer air smelled like roses. Diana sat alone at her mahogany desk, and the lamp made long shadows on the walls. Pictures of her kids, William and Harry, beamed back at her. Their expressions were innocent in a world that had not been kind to them. She was 35 years old and had been through a lot. Her marriage was finished, her crown was gone, and millions of people had observed, judged, and picked apart her life. But that night, Diana would do something that everyone would notice. She grabbed her pen since she knew this wasn't just signing paperwork. This was her voice after she passed, her chance to choose what was most important. She could have quietly spent or wasted the £17 million she got from the divorce, book deals, and selling jewelry. Instead, she devised a plan that would shock the palace, the press, and anyone who felt they were in charge of her. It was clear, brave, and careful what Diana wanted. She gave 75% of her estate to a charity that had been important to her life, like helping people with AIDS, landmine victims, and children who didn't have families. She wasn't giving the world a quiet gift. She was making a statement about what was most important to her. She gave 25% of the money to trusts for her sons, William and Harry, but she wasn't giving them the keys totally. Every cent was safe, taken care of, and directed. Diana wanted to make sure her boys were safe and well cared for, but she also wanted to keep them from the brutality of the royal world she knew too well. And then there was the twist that shocked everyone. Paul Burrell, her butler for 10 years, was designated executor. The man who had cleaned her shoes, kept her secrets, and been her quiet support was now in charge of her money. He would be in charge of all the trusts, distributions, and donations to charity. In other words, the one person who really knew her heart would be in charge of her legacy. Not a lawyer in the palace. No counselor to the king. Just Burrell. That night, Diana didn't disguise how she felt. She cried gently as she signed each paper and told Burrell, "This is my last chance to be free." Her statements weren't just for show. They were real. Every stroke of her pen was a protest, a reminder that betrayal, divorce, and unrelenting scrutiny had not shattered her. The palace sought to get involved. Lawyers were circling, talking in low voices about instability and amendments. They wanted her to alter it so that it followed their rules. Diana's fingers didn't shake, and her heart didn't either. This was her time, and she wouldn't give it up. She made sure that nothing was left to chance. Her will was very clear. All of the jewelry, property, art, and cash were counted. The Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund, AIDS work, landmine campaigns, and children's causes that she loved will go on even after she is gone. Her boys' trusts were safe and well-structured so that they would gain without getting involved in royal games. Diana had written a paper that was both useful and strong. But the true shock was about to come, the twist that no one saw coming. Most people thought the estate would only help her sons and charities, but in the end, one person had the keys to everything. One person who could decide what would happen to her stories, her treasures, and her legacy. One individual who would make sure that Diana's voice, her defiance, and her power would be heard for years to come. Who was the person? And why did Diana put her faith in them? That narrative would blow out in ways that the palace, the media, and the world weren't ready for. But for now, the only thing that mattered was that Diana was in charge. She had written her will. She had done her last act of defiance. And with that pen, she had taught the world that even death could not stop her from speaking. Who really inherited everything? On the surface, Diana's will looked simple. £17 million was carefully split up, with most going to charities and some going to her two sons, William and Harry. But the true shock was what was buried between the clean lines of the paper. The one person who had complete control over her estate. Paul Burrell was Diana's butler, her friend, and her silent protector. He wasn't simply a servant. He was the one who knew all of her deepest secrets, like the letters from lovers that she kept concealed and the late-night discussions in the kitchen. He had been there for her through bulimia, grief,